Here we go. This is the male cat that Brian and I dissected to create this video. And we're going to go from anterior structures to posterior structures. So starting with the nose, you see the external nares. And then you can see the tongue sticking out of the oral cavity. And notice the tongue is attached to the lower jaw by a ligament called the lingual frenulum right here. And if we open the oral cavity, you see the hard palate, of course the teeth, hard palate, soft palate, and then the tongue, which has kind of been mangled a little bit. And you can feel on the tongue, I'll be quiet for a minute so you can hear the scraping. Those rough scaly things are called filiform papilla, and cats use those for grooming. Saliva is released into the oral cavity by two pairs of salivary glands. On this side you see a very large parotid salivary gland. There would be another one on this side, but it's not isolated. And on this side we have a nice submandibular salivary gland. Notice that if we open, this is essentially the oral cavity. If we open the oral cavity further or pull the jaw away, we're opening the pharynx or the pharyngeal cavity. And this leads to the nasal cavity. So underneath the soft palate leads to the nasal cavity. At the base of the pharynx is an opening to the respiratory system and an opening to the digestive system. So first I'm going to show you the opening to the respiratory system. The hole that I'm trying to pry open there, can you see that okay? Is called the glottis. And it's covered by this cartilage called the epiglottis when food is swallowed over the tongue. So this glottis leads to the larynx, or the airways, to the respiratory system. Dorsal to the larynx is the opening to the esophagus, which you can see right here. And we'll identify it again as we go down through the neck. Okay, let's look at the larynx in a little bit more detail here. The larynx is made up of several cartilages. The epiglottis is also a cartilage, but the prominent one here is called the thyroid cartilage, and beneath it is the cricoid cartilage. So that makes up the larynx. On either side of the larynx, we should have been able to find thyroid glands, but they've either been removed or were very insignificant in this cat, so you can't see them. This is the trachea, and you can see the cartilage rings of the trachea. If you turn it over to look at the dorsal surface of the trachea, notice that the rings are C-shaped. It's soft right here. And that's so this esophagus can expand into the trachea if need be, but not very far. Since we're up here, I'm going to go ahead and do some vessels in the kind of sternum neck region. This is the aortic arch right here, and we'll come back to that and look at it in relationship to the heart. But this aortic arch gives off two prominent arteries. This is the left subclavian artery. This is the brachiocephalic artery, and the brachiocephalic, or trunk you can call it. The brachiocephalic trunk branches into three arteries. This is the left common carotid. This is the right common carotid artery, and then this is the right subclavian. And after the subclavian goes around that first rib, right here, we would call that the axillary artery. The subclavian artery gives off two smaller branches or vessels. This one's the thyrocervical artery, but I think I crossed it off your list, so you don't have to know it, but it's really nice in this cat. And then, oops, sorry about that. And then the other little one here is called the vertebral artery, and it dives down into the cervical vertebrae and takes blood to the brain. So it looks insignificant, but it's very important. So here we have the right subclavian, thyrocervical, axillary, and then when you get out to the arm, we're going to go way out here. Now we're going to call it brachial artery here. I think that's all the arteries you have to know up in this region, but there's a few associated with the heart. So now we're going to go down to the thoracic cavity. Note that in this cat, I cut away the sternum and most of the ventral rib cage. So you can't see the internal mammary artery that would branch off of the subclavians. Here's a breaking point right there. That probably was the internal mammary that led to the ventral surface of the thoracic cavity, or wall of the thorax. So this is the heart, and the pericardium has been removed in its entirety. We do have lungs next to the heart that are covered in visceral pleura, and the parietal pleura stays adhered. I'm going to go on this side so Brian can get a picture of it better. See this shininess of the thoracic cavity. Maybe over here you can see it better. That's parietal pleura. It stays adhered to the thorax wall. Okay, so let's do regions of the heart. So there are two ventricles. Right ventricle, left ventricle, right atrium. Pull it over like this. Left atrium, right there. And leading from the right ventricle is the pulmonary artery. You can kind of tell the pulmonary trunk is starting right there. And I eviscerated it a little bit, looking for the connection to the lungs. So you won't probably be asked on this cat, but this would be the pulmonary artery right here. And then the aorta, the ascending aorta, is right here. Here's the aortic arch, and then that's the descending aorta. Now we're going to look at the lobes of the lungs. So on the left, there should be 3, and on the right, there should be 4. So let's count. So here's 3 lobes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 on the left side. And on the right side, there should be 4. See if I can spread them out as nicely. Probably not. Here's 1. Here's 2. Here's 3, which is really big. And then here's that little last one called the caudate lobe. Leading to the heart are 2 veins carrying blood back to the heart. This is the superior vena cava that's been cut so that we could expose the trachea. And the inferior vena cava is right here. So the thoracic cavity goes from the top of the sternum to the diaphragm, and so this muscle is the diaphragm, right here. And you see the inferior vena cava kind of pierces it. Also, I want to show the descending aorta in the thoracic cavity, how it goes down. Thank you. So here's the thoracic, the thoracic descending aorta, and branching off of the aorta are intercostal arteries that supply blood to the intercostal muscles and the wall of the thorax. Also descending is the esophagus, which was under the trachea over here. This is esophagus. This is esophagus. I'll lift the trachea up. And it continues, so that's esophagus. And it's going to lead all the way down through the diaphragm and into the stomach, which we're going to talk about soon. Now, of course, the trachea will not extend beyond this region. Oh, that's nice. Because it branches into 2 prominent bronchi, which you can see better from this side. I think. Maybe not. I can get glimpses of it, but I can't get it on here. There's two bronchi. So the trachea will not continue posterior to that. That's where it bifurcates. Okay, I think that's all for the thoracic cavity.
The azygous vein.
Oh, the azygous vein. Thanks, Brian. Okay, so the azygous vein, right, that's why he's over here. It is on the right side of the thorax. It's not very good in this cat. We have another cat that it's injected very blue, but this is the azygous vein, and it drains blood from the dorsal thoracic wall right into the heart. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to do the abdominal pelvic region, and we'll start with digestive structures, and then we'll work on urinary and reproductive. So beneath the diaphragm is the prominent liver. In all mammals, well, actually all vertebrates, the liver is huge. And the gallbladder peeks out right here. The gallbladder stores bile, and that bile is released into the small intestine through a duct called the common bile duct, which is right here. So this is all gallbladder, and this is the common bile duct leading into this part of the small intestine, which is the beginning of the small intestine, known as the duodenum. Okay, we need to look at the falciform ligament, which I forgot last time, so it's good we're doing this again. This is the falciform ligament, and then there's different lobes to the liver. We have the left lateral, left medial. The right medial usually houses the gallbladder, and then the right lateral is really small on this cat. And then this is called the caudate lobe, just like the lung had a caudate lobe. Okay, so the esophagus comes down.
And the right medial is where again?
Oh, the right medial? Did I miss that?
No,
the right
I just want to
medial.
make sure I got it.
Right, this little guy.
Okay, right medial.
This one right there. Yep. Thank you. And then back to the stomach. So the esophagus, move the liver over. The esophagus comes down into the stomach. This whole thing is the stomach. And where the stomach narrows is called the pylorus. And between the pylorus region of the stomach and the beginning of the small intestine, there's a valve. And that's called the pyloric valve or pyloric sphincter, either one. And so material is squirted periodically into the small intestine. The stomach is attached to the greater omentum, or I should say the greater omentum is normally attached to the stomach. We cut it off so that we could find some other structures. So this membranous, it's a two-layered thing, this membranous material, that's the greater omentum. It functions in fat storage as well as just keeping the abdominal organs in place. So we kind of took it off, but I'll lift up the stomach now so that we can see that the spleen is on the left side. It's quite elongated in a cat versus round in a human. And it also reveals the pancreas, which I tried to separate out a little bit so you can make it out. So this is the pancreas, and it's always under the stomach. So even if the greater omentum was not here, and you just lifted up the stomach, you would see the pancreas underneath. Okay, so as far as the small intestine goes, there's 3 regions, and you need to be able to list those 3 regions in order. They include the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. The first is the duodenum, starts right here, and it winds. It actually comes over to this side, and it winds up, and it goes down, it goes all over the place. And then it ends, the whole small intestine ends when it connects to the large intestine. Sorry, what did I already messed it up again? Right. Sorry. I messed it up again. I'm looking at it from a different angle. Sorry, just a second. Gina, get a grip. Sorry. Okay, one more time. So, stomach, duodenum, winding all over the place. It comes back to the same side, right here. This is the end. I know it's the end of the small intestine because it's connected to the large intestine. So this is the ileum. I-L-E-U-M, just in case you forget. So there's a valve that controls the entry of material from the small intestine to the large intestine. It's underneath this fat pad, that region, inside. It's called the ileocecal valve. It's named for the ileum and this pouch, which is called the cecum. That's the beginning of the small intestine. There is no appendix in a cat. So if we are trying to make the cat's large intestine, also known as the colon, mimic the regions we find in humans, this would be equivalent to the ascending colon, transverse colon, and then descending colon. Not much of a sigmoid at all. And then as it dives down deep, show you where my probe goes here. Since you're on that side. Here, I'll flip this over. That's rectum down there. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, let's do urinary. Okay, so the urinary system includes 2 kidneys, which make the urine. The urine is collected, this is 1 kidney right here, collected in the ureter and stored in the urinary bladder. And in a male cat, the urinary bladder has at its base not just 2 ureters that carry urine, but also at its base you'll find this membranous structure, which is where the 2 vas deferens, tubes that carry sperm, connect, and they're going to lead to the urethra, which also carries urine. So we have kidney, ureter, urinary bladder, and then for the urine to be expelled, it goes out this urethra, which is within the penis, and the penis is this enlarged region right here. So that's the penis, which has the urogenital opening, which I'm pretty sure we will never. Oh, look at that. Kind of see it a little bit. Where the urethra and the vas deferens meet, it's really clean on this side. It's not so clean on that side. We're switching again. It's a little cleaner here. You can see the vas deferens meeting the urethra, and there's an enlarged section. That's the prostate gland. It looks like it's been injected with blue latex, but that's the prostate gland. So that leads us to the reproductive system in the male. And in this cat, we have both testicles exposed. Here's one, here's the other. That's where sperm is produced. And the spermatic cord contains the vas deferens, which we've identified in the body cavity, but the spermatic cord has the vas deferens as well as an artery and a vein. And the spermatic cord travels through the body wall in the inguinal canal. So if you can tell, I'm moving the spermatic cord through the inguinal canal. On this side, I opened the inguinal canal so that you could see the entire spermatic cord and how the vas deferens branches away from the artery. There's also a nerve and a vein right here. So we call this spermatic cord, but we call this the vas deferens because it only contains sperm. I think that's the entire male reproductive. Yes, indeed. Okay, so now we're going to do posterior vessels, and you're on a good side for that. So we're going to start with the aorta. That's our landmark. So here's the descending aorta coming down through the thoracic cavity. The intercostal arteries branch off. And when it goes through the diaphragm and enters the abdominal cavity, it gives off three major, what we call trunks. This one is called the celiac trunk. And in the cat, it's right next to the superior mesenteric. We call it artery instead of trunk. And then further down, the third one is called, and it's got goop attached to it, which I couldn't get off. Here, this is called the inferior mesenteric. Which reminds me, I did not tell you what mesentery is. Mesentery includes all the membranes that you see connecting the small intestines. So you can tell that there are vessels in the mesentery. Those vessels will come from either the superior mesenteric artery or the inferior mesenteric artery. Okay, let's do branches of the celiac trunk or celiac artery. I think you're in a good spot for that. So this branch from the celiac trunk is called the splenic artery. Okay. This one, which actually branches into multiple, but it's called the gastric because it goes to the stomach. And then there's one deeper, oh good, right here, that goes to the liver. This is liver tissue right here. Right here. That's the hepatic artery. Hepatic, gastric, splenic arteries. Superior mesenteric, we don't have to know any branches. It goes to the mesentery. And then the renal artery, I isolated on this side. It's not very pretty because it's not injected. It's all just a gray color. That is the renal artery right there. There'd be one on this side too for the other kidney. If we go more posterior or down the length of the abdominal cavity, again, here's the inferior mesenteric, and right after the inferior mesenteric artery are two arteries that are very perpendicular to the aorta. Those are called iliolumbar arteries, left and right. And then the aorta kind of bifurcates. It does so twice, actually. Here is an external iliac artery. Here's the other external iliac artery. So right external iliac, left external iliac. And then it branches again. The aorta sort of continues. I don't really know what you call that section. Not injected is the internal iliac artery. And then here's the other one right here. There should be a caudal artery. Yeah, it's really hard to see in this cat. It's right there, it's not injected. Those are all the vessels you have to know. I think we got everything. Oh, one thing I did not mention is the membrane that lines the abdominal cavity is called the peritoneum. And that's all for the male cat.